This week has been very insightful, going deep into the benefits of cooperative work. Um, and so I just want to give a second to highlight any insights or thoughts that folks may have um, from the reading so far. What has been the most impactful piece of information that you've gained so far? That's on anybody. For me, I would say the most impactful is just seeing the numerous cooperatives that were started from like 1790 up till now, or semi recently, right to 2012. Just so many examples of folks coming together and putting their minds, talents, and economics together despite all of the opposition, whether it be, just regular business opposition, competition, or cultural opposition in which, folks didn't want to see the proliferation of black businesses. And so they did what they had to keep that pacified and underground. Um, so one thing to understand about the structure of a cooperative, right? We talked about the social impact and the economic impact. A little bit deeper is understanding the processes of a cooperative, right? It's similar to a business in a lot of ways. Piece of those coming in the chat and Insta. Um, so I wanted to take a piece of Jackson Rising, right, on page 21. Um, we've been talking about Jackson Rising and their different elements of their plans, right? They have their bank that they wanted to start. They had their Federation of Local Cooperatives, a cooperative incubator. So today we want to talk about the value chains and supply chains and the difference between the two. And that applies to your business no matter what organization you want to start, because if you're doing a service or a product, there's usually pieces of it that go into that service or product at its finished point. So once you get there, that's room for collaboration and cooperation with other cooperatives, or something you might want to bring into your fold to keep the production in house, right? So just understanding the difference between those two. So let's read 21 on Jackson Rising. Value chains are the decision-making processes by which cooperatives or any form of business receive and process raw materials, add value to the raw materials through various labor and technical processes to create a finished product, then sell and or exchange the end product to customers and communities through effective distribution and marketing. Okay. A supply chain is the entire network of entities, directly or indirectly, interlinked and interdependent in serving the same customer base or market. It comprises vendors who supply raw material, natural resources, producers who convert these materials and resources, warehouses, the store, the products, distribution centers. Supply chains underlie value chains because without them, no producer has the ability to give customers what they want. So whatever you choose to do, you're a part of an ecosystem, whether you know it or not. This computer I'm talking on, had to go through many uh, parts to be assembled, right? It needed the microchips. Somebody had to fabricate the housing for the microchips. Somebody had to configure the screen, however screens are made. Um, Somebody had to test it. Somebody had to make sure. So those are things that are more like value chain, right? Apple, I'm sure, has all of those processes somewhat in house, But even before it got to Apple, you know, there were things about this computer that had to go through other businesses. Unless, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if Apple did own the whole supply chain and the value chain, because you're dealing with trillions of dollars at that point, right? But on a smaller level, most likely, you know, when we think of food, there's a supply chain, you know, growers and, you know, the distribution, all of these different things play a part into, you know, farm to your table. We got more folks coming in. Okay. Peace, Raquel. Peace, Nathaniel. What it do, Z? All my folks is in here. Um, in the Insta chat, we got Kusi, Andrew, Jess, Walsh. Thanks for joining us. I hope y'all can join us in the Zoom. DM us if you're interested. Right now, we just read a little bit of Jackson Rising. So now we're going to move into Collective Courage, uh, page 15. And we're going to go to 20. All right. So let me see. Actually, one second, y'all. Just got to get myself together. Okay. All right. We're going to start in the middle. Haynes and I have also identified the elements of the Mondragon cooperation in northern Spain that are replicable and illustrate network cooperative economic development. We identify elements such as solidarity, worker sovereignty, clustering, leadership development, and education as essential to understanding cooperatives as a group economic strategy. So to me, that reads like these are the different elements that have made Mondragon successful. Mondragon is a cooperative out of Spain that, you know, created a lot of the foundation that cooperatives underpin themselves with. They created some principles that we go off of. Um, so we'll be learning a lot more from them. And let's keep going to page 17 under methodology, uh, where it says, indeed, the crisis published 12 articles between 1914 and 1944 about African American owned cooperatives. Our black publications, The Black World, The Messenger, and The Phylon, contain several more. These stories in the crisis and other periodicals led me to archive of Ella Jo Baker, executive director of the Young Negroes Cooperative League, where I found more information about African American cooperatives. So the different uh, journals that she just mentioned, the author just mentioned, were uh, pieces written by W.E.B. Du Bois, who's a hero of mine. And, you know, that's the other part of this ecosystem that we got to celebrate is those who write about and bring attention to what we do. You know, W.E.B. Du Bois was very prolific in his writing and research. He was doing much of the same work that Jessica Gordon Nimhart was doing when she wrote this book, but he was around during the time a lot of these cooperatives were starting up, so he got to see a little more firsthand and or was hearing about it in his network as they were growing. So it gave something to look back to, because a lot of these cooperatives may have not kept the best records, you know. So history favors the prepared, and I feel like he was prepared. He talks a lot about the 100-year plan, right? And I feel like the fact that his writings has been education for educators, I think is part of that 100-year plan, right? Somebody has to present the ideas in a fashion that can be consumed, and then somebody else, after time passes, will get inspired and build off of that. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And then, of course, Ella Jo Baker, who was also a hero of mine, was mentioned. So we'll keep it moving to page 18. Um, Basically, these are just the author's process, talking through what she learned and the different pieces of information she went through. So I was interested in cooperative economic development as a community economic development strategy, and my focus was on cooperatives help subaltern populations gain economic independence, especially in the face of racial segregation, racial discrimination, and market failure. Right. So the resilience that was showed in these different cooperatives is what amazed the author. She saw how folks who had nothing came together and created businesses and created a way for money to circulate amongst themselves in the face of big opposition. So that's very respectable. Skip down to the end of that paragraph. As a specialist in racial wealth inequality, I also began exploring ways in which cooperative ownership, particularly in worker cooperatives, is a strategy for community-based asset building, and I began to develop a concept of community wealth based on cooperative ownership and community assets. So that's something that is also repeated throughout both of these texts is the commons, right? Is understanding what is owned. We want to move away from ownership in the individualistic mindset, right? Because if one person owns something, then it can get complicated when it comes to resources that everyone needs. If somebody owns land where there's water and they can privatize that water, then they can push up the price of it. We've seen that in third world countries, or countries that are not as developed, um, for use of a better term, where companies literally tried to own the rain. You know what I'm saying? Like it was illegal for people to gather rain. I don't remember exactly where that was. I don't know if it was El Salvador or somewhere like that, but it was somewhere in South America where that happened. And I don't think they were successful, but the gall, the audacity to be like, you can't gather rain. We're coming for you if you try to gather resources that come from God. That's the slippery slope that individualism can lead us. Um, Natalie says in capitalism, the value chain is how much money you can make off of others' inputs in your supply chain. In a solidarity, co benefits added to people and planet all along the supply chain. Let's break that down a little bit. So basically, Natalie's saying that the value chain is where you can make money off of people's input into the supply chain. But in a different example of an economy like a solidarity cooperative economy, value is something that is regenerative, or reciprocal at every point of the supply chain, including the planet, reciprocal to the planet as well as the people who are involved. Um, so thank you for articulating that, because I would agree that we want to aim for regenerative value in supply chains. And I think cooperative work will lead to that, because if you can build a cooperative and then build cooperatives on top of that, or at the same time as that, then we could find where we need to align and create business culture that isn't extractive. We want to avoid just extracting without putting back. Avoid chopping the trees without planting new ones. Right. So we're gonna keep going. Cal says here too, right, in CA about the rain situation. I'm not sure if they did that in California, but you know, you got to be careful with these bills that get presented. They'll be having one headline, but in the fine print, they trying to do something totally different. So you got to be. They might call it infrastructure bill, but in the infrastructure bill, they trying to do something a little more dubious that's not necessarily as obvious. So you got to be careful. And I feel like it's important to have people in your circle who are dedicated to politics. I think that a lot of us avoid it because it's not favorable. It's not cool a lot of the times. It's not something that I'm an artist, so it's something that I kind of am diametrically opposed to sometimes, just because it's a certain flow to it that is different than how I like to flow. But I also feel like it's a necessity. We politic all the time. I'm politicking with y'all. You know, just talking and building with folks is politicking, but also on an official level, politics does have a huge effect on our lives. It affects our taxes. It affects how we, uh, our schools. It affects, you know, our liberties or lack thereof. All right, let's keep it moving to the bottom of page 18. As a specialist in racial wealth inequality, oh, I read that part already. Sorry. The top of 19. Collective courage is a historical study largely based on primary sources: newspaper, magazine, and journal articles, co-ops, articles of incorporation, annual meeting minutes, newsletters, budgets, and income statements, and cooperators, letters and papers, memoirs, and biographies. So she went deep. She didn't just find the business organization paper, she found minutes, meeting minutes. I mean, that's something that seems so small, but I mean, it gives evidence that, you know, folks were very adamant about, you know, figuring out how to improve or, you know, to have order to what they were doing. So, man, I just give a lot of thanks to Jessica Gordon Nimhart for just being so thorough. Like, you know, one of the pages she mentioned how she couldn't even get it all. She wanted to go deeper, but she couldn't. It was actually put the book out, but um, I can tell by just how deep she went that she's very dedicated to what she does. Um, so I want to open it up a little bit to someone else to read a little bit. Is there any volunteers?
I can read. Let me get book.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Shower. We on page 19.
Okay. Okay. At the top, 19 at the top.
Right below the top where it says while my archival research.
Okay. While my archival research proved it impossible to uncover full case study narratives of most of the African American cooperative enterprises and organizations from the past, I was able to collect many case study snapshots of cooperative activity among African Americans to illustrate the success and challenges of Black cooperative enterprises. Much of this information comes from newspaper and journal articles about specific cooperatives, memoirs of cooperative developers, and archives of cooperative organizations and their directors. Shall I continue? Yeah. In addition, I engaged in applied participatory community-based research as a part of the U.S. cooperative movement and the African American cooperative movement. I have studied cooperative enterprises and economics in the United States and Canada, and have participated in developing cooperative organizations and conferences to promote cooperative education and development. These organizations bring co-op members and supporters together to exchange best practices, provide education and training, organize and participate in co-op study tours, promote cooperative development, and network. This has allowed me to meet with many people, practitioners and scholars in the cooperative movements in the United States and Canada, to learn from their presentations, talk with their members, and visit some of their cooperatives. I am particularly involved in the growing US worker cooperative movement, and I now specialize in worker cooperatives. Many participatory community-based research involves co-op members, co-op leaders, and co-op developers who articulate social, cultural, and political, as well as economic impacts, and identifies relevant indicators to measure traditional and non-traditional outcomes of cooperative ownership. In addition to gathering information from workshops, presentations, and conferences, I use existing case studies and annual reports to assess the impact and benefits of co-ops and to understand their mission and history.
That's cool. We can stop right there. Um, so she basically goes into detail, right, of how she researched. Um, I like to highlight how she engaged in applied participatory community-based research. Like she went into the communities and created links, created community with these folks to learn more about it. And I think that's a very um, specific way of doing things. I hear a lot of criticism for those who become expats to other places in Africa, where they go and they come from America with a capitalistic mindset. They go over there like, hey, I'm about to go over there and just buy up everything, or become a landlord, or you know, I'm gonna just Mansa Musa spread my money around and just be the king over there, when it's really about building community. And how about going over there first and seeing what you could offer that community first, and I feel like that level of patience and um, specific way of doing things brings about a different result from the people, right? Because then they may feel more inclined to give you more inclined to let you know, like, details that you might have missed if you just came in on some, here, like, let me get this from you for a little piece of nothing. So I appreciate her doing that. And it's something about participating that allows you to learn something deeper than if you were to just talk about it, right? So shout out to Brother Tut, who's leading the work-based learning program, which is doing something similar in the sense that folks are being led through a curriculum, learning about cooperatives from the book in this book club, but also going deeper after the book club, and really trying to internalize the information, and then from there become interns in actual co-ops. So the work is very profound in that way, and so we give thanks for the examples that set before us, because we're really trying to do it, not just learn about it, but like, okay, these are the examples that we have, let's do it. So um, anybody else want to finish us off from the top of page 20, where it says this story of African American cooperative? um, Natalie says the donor industrial complex forces you into having to meet fictional deadlines to block relationship building. Ooh, that's a big one right there. That's something that as an organization we're aware of. We do operate off donations and funding, but the reality is money comes with strings attached. So you want to ideally make your own money. If you can't do that yet, then you want to work with organizations that give you money based off values that you're aligned with, rather than folks giving you money just for the sake of giving you money. So you think you're winning, but you're actually being taken in a new direction, maybe even a direction opposite of where you want to go, because you have to follow the rules of the money that's given to you. So uh, thank you for bringing that up, Natalie, because yeah, we got to be very careful of the dollars we accept. Um, but anybody else, any takers on that reading, or I could just knock it out? Million, look like you about to say something.
I'm trying to
No,
pull up
okay.
the PDF. My phone is acting like a jerk. Can somebody show it on the screen? I'll read it. I'll pull over.
Um, you know what? I don't think we have the PDF available on
No, I'm
screen
trying
yet.
to get it off
Sorry
my
about
phone,
that.
but
We
it's
usually do, but I guess today we have a. No worries.
I can show
I
the book
appreciate
on
you.
my phone if you want.
Yeah, if it's legible, I know sometimes the cameras be
Here, let's see.
zooming in and out trying to find the sweet spot. So
I
let's give it a
know.
try.
Here we go. Can you see it? I don't know.
okay.
Let me
Where
see
I
if I
start
can.
out?
You can start out at the story of African American Cooperative. It's kind of like the second paragraph from the top.
Where the page just go? It showed up for like 2.5 seconds and then it disappeared.
Oh, it says I can't share screen because I'm not a host.
Let me share this. Oh, you know what? I signed into the wrong account. It's like a couple accounts that I have to be aware of. So I don't
Oh,
have hosting.
This story of African American cooperative economy activity is told partly in chronological order and partially theoretically. Themes such as economic independence, economic protection, and stabilization in the face of discrimination and violence, women's role, education and training, youth intervention, involvement, and community economic development are in, inter interwoven into a linear treatment of the development of African American cooperatives in the 19th and 20th century. This is the first book-length work to connect the dots of African American cooperative endeavors. A note of terminology: I use the term African American and Black interchangeably, although I understand that they are nuanced differently. I can't. It's starting to differently
Okay.
between the two terms and how they are used. I also capitalize the word Black when I use it as a racial category. Excuse me. I use the word cooperative, no hyphen, as opposed to the short form co-op, always hyphenated, except when quoting or referencing to organizations that use the hyphen, as some of the cooperatives discussed in the book do, especially until the 1940s.
Solid. Thank you for reading that, Brother Kyle. Yes. So
I thank the
that's
lady for holding it up and letting me see her page.
yeah. Raquel came in, saved the day. So yeah. So that's a little bit of her process and some of the things she did to get this information. Um, she's also very aware of the social nuances, right? She says, look, I say Black, I say African American because I understand like it's interchangeable, but people have views that are differing. So let me just acknowledge it. I think acknowledgement is a good place to start when it comes to finding a common ground for our differences, you know. So I'll leave y'all with that. We'll be back Monday, same black time, same black channel. I appreciate all of my usual suspects coming through and tapping in with us. And I hope to see y'all Monday.
Have a
Adios.
blessed weekend.
All right. Peace, y'all.
Thanks, Ajman. I wasn't raising my hand,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely am available to help when I am on here, just to let you know.
Cool. I appreciate your energy.
Peace.
Thanks for joining us.